Alrighty, hello folks, and good morning. Welcome to a sort of after-action report thing on the Tactics Ogre Reborn speedrun to explain some of the stuff that worked, some of the stuff that didn't, some of the stuff that panned out particularly well, and the frustrating technical issue because, technically speaking, this was essentially a world run, or world record run of Tactics Ogre Reborn. And that would be awesome, except for the fact that nobody told me that YouTube apparently just sort of stops recording after 12 hours. Yeah, so that's cool. Anyway, I don't know exactly how accurate that statement is. That's what Google told me, and frankly, after I'd already completed the thing, I went back to the playback of it because I told my computer to go and download it so that I could go and kind of fiddle around with it. But here's the weird part. On the one hand, we have the fact that my thing ran out of space because it's a Steam Deck, because it constantly runs out of space, so you have to move stuff around. I had about half a gig, not enough space to actually download the thing, even though it said it would have had enough space. I guess it started downloading an update in the middle of it. So that download ended up getting interrupted and just didn't end up completing. I have the original download that doesn't seem to have the full thing on there. I tried telling YouTube to go restore it to its original version, which it doesn't seem to actually do. I don't know if there's any further options to follow up with on that one, but it seems to have basically just chopped off the last hour, give or take, of the run. So if by any chance anybody has that laying around, pretty much everything from like the final two bits going up to Andorus, the final maps going down into Hell's Gate, and then the final boss, those are the bits that got cut out. It is extremely frustrating, but again, that's just kind of where we're at right now. So anyways, count it how you want to count it, but let's go ahead and discuss what worked or didn't, shall we? One little note to detail here before we get going. You might notice that there's technically 3 separate times here. So I went for the one in the middle because I don't exactly know which one is technically more accurate. So we have the real world timer, which said 13 hours, 11 minutes, 31 and a half seconds. We had the in-game timer that originally said 13 hours, 13 minutes, and then we had the last save that I have here that says 13 hours, 21 minutes. Now, the reason for that discrepancy, partway through, I had originally intended to have 2 separate counters, just kind of using the in-game timer as well as the video itself to determine kind of how much time had passed. And so when I got a phone call from my wife and kids, went to go step away to go take that for a bit. And so that was 9 minutes and 2 seconds, and like walking back and forth a couple rooms, so probably a few seconds more. And yeah, so essentially stopped it for a minute, came back, and then realized, you know what, that's kind of stupid. And then at the very end, I just basically added a timer for another 9 minutes, 2 seconds, and just let it run, and then stopped the timer after that. Figured, you know what, no one's attempting this stuff anyway, so close enough. You know what? I tried my best on that one. So that's why we have 3 separate timers. In-game time, again, with the sort of like Hell's Gate icon at the end there, said 1313, so that's kind of what I'm counting it as, but kind of, I don't know which one technically would count as more official or whatever else. Again, this is not really a category anybody does because of how freakishly long this run is. Now, let's go ahead and properly get into stuff here. Alright, so first and foremost, actually, let's go ahead and load the proper save file here. One quick moment. Here, let's go ahead and sort by save date. Go all the way to the top here because I want to see my titles, because I like my titles for this one. Alright, so I'll go ahead and load up the titles here. So, cool thing about this, yeah, so we ended up doing it without any casualties, ended up doing it without any chariot uses, as well as no money exploits or anything else. So you don't need any of that stuff to beat this game. This was all done basically just using the sort of flying by the seat of your pants method. There were only 2 hiccups over the course of the entire run, otherwise it was pretty much entirely clean all the way through. One of those hiccups was the Leonard duel, because this was about 10 hours into the damn thing, and frankly my brain was just off in space at that moment. So I got into the Leonard duel as a rune fencer and was like, I literally had the best possible setup that I could for taking on that boss, and for some reason my brain was like, what if we just try to finisher spam him to death? And you're supposed to just run side to side and spam missiles. what are you doing? So that ended up taking about 20 minutes. That's time that could have been saved. And additionally, after that, there was another moment in which the doppelganger fight at the very end. I tried to get a little bit cheeky by going for a Brynhildr Lombardia build, and then realized, wait, it's going to take a little bit of a while to actually RNG this guy off the cliff. So that ended up being a little bit of a dumb plan. Now, theoretically, that could actually speed up the fight if you get lucky, because you can get a bunch of free attacks over the course of the thing. Ultimately, though, just go shield on final boss. Anyway, so that being said, every other fight was done without any resets or anything. Like, we never had to fully load a save or anything, just basically use the RAM save throughout all of it, only saving at the very end of the game, which it's, you know, we can definitely say for sure that the game can be run all the way through without it crashing. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk a few things that got missed towards the very end, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the party that was used. So, first off, as far as the very end goes, the video technically seems to cut off around here. Was it here or was it here? Yeah, it was at the Ebon Stair. So Ebon Stair is basically Phoenix Hell. And it sucks because that Phoenix fight was so... that thing was down to the wire. So let me explain Hanging Gardens real quick, just to explain the route through here, because it's really by far the fastest way. So first of all, foot of the gardens, you want to open up the door that's over here. Just have any flying unit run over here, open up the door. That opens up the secret path to Halcyon Days. You go ahead and open up the door. I think it was over here. And then that will open up the secret path over to Sounding of the Hours, and here, this is the one that's a little bit frustrating, because that door is all the way up here, so you have to kind of pardon your flyer to go all the way up here while you're dealing with 3 cockatrices. And so you open up the shortcut that way, and then that ends up getting you to the Ebon Stair, and then at the Ebon Stair you have to fly a flyer down here to open up the door in this section right here, which then allows you to skip the Undead Hell map and go straight to Twixt Heaven and Earth. Now, this map in particular I want to bring up because it's the perfect example of why we did one of the routing changes for this particular playthrough. So, first time that I was talking about speedrunning, I went for the zombie method. So in Chapter 1 you can recruit a zombie from Nybeth's units. You can get either a Rune Fencer or a Soldier. The Rune Fencer is ideal, the Soldier is the backup, and that allows you to have basically a regenerating recruiter. Now, 2 downsides of this. So, first of all, plus sides. They're basically immortal. There's almost no units that are going to be able to fully kill them outside of a boss in Chapter 4. And on top of that, they'll be able to sort of come back from the dead and attempt to recruit people. So they're very good as a sort of backup plan if things go wrong. Ideally, you don't let things get to that point, is kind of what we're going to go for here. Now, one thing to mention, though, is that in this particular method, I just went for replacing them with a beast unit. Every beast unit that you can acquire over the course of this route, so we specifically went Chaos in this case, allows you to have a heavyweight unit with dash, and that allows you to take this spot right here, which drastically speeds up the Endorus fight. So the first time that I was doing this one, back about a year ago, getting through this section was a bit of a pain because you had to look for an opening to get past the golems. Any beast with dash, you can just immediately take the stairs, don't even have to do that part. So that ends up helping quite a decent bit. Additionally, it's worth mentioning at this point, shield bashes can be slightly unreliable as far as throwing units off the cliff. So if you have Conserve MP and Exercise on Denim, that would be a far faster method. I was trying to be cheeky and go for like shield bash into Exorcism, but that didn't end up panning out. That actually ended up taking a lot of extra time and didn't end up killing the Cyclops. It came back to life. It was a whole thing. Final Stand is super easy as always. Mardim and Barbas, pretty much like just breach and hit with air units. You as soon as you breach them and hit them with finishers, that's really all you got to do. As long as you tank Barbas's petrification finisher with somebody that doesn't die, you're good. And then finally, for King Dorky, the method is basically the classic invincibility method, which is going to be over on Denim here. So now we're going to talk about the final party. We're just going to go ahead and sort them. Here, not that. Let's go ahead and sort them based on level. Also, I should probably point out this was we're using mouse and keyboard for the purpose of showing things off right now. This was all done using button inputs because I just personally think it's more comfortable. All right, so let's go down the list of party members and how they got there, why we did what we did. So first of all, we've got Denim, who's going to be running Lord. Now, ran swords on him in this instance because of a lot of benefits that it gives us. So early on, it allows him to get basically free upgrades. In Chapter 1, we give him a rapier, and we keep that on him until we can upgrade it from the shop in Chapter 2. From there, he gets a falchion as a prize later on down the road. We immediately give him the falchion in Chapter 3, upgrade it from the shop, and now he has a fall strike weapon for both of those cases, and he ends up keeping it on hand up until we get the Brynhilder. So if you were somebody that was looking to constantly upgrade weapons, don't. Those basic debuff weapons will constantly keep running for you throughout the entire game. I mean, hell, we even have our starting archer who is still running her Chapter 1 longbow in the post-game. So there's no excuse for constantly going and upgrading things. You don't have to worry about that. Alright, so first of all, Denim, as far as his final build here, classic is First Aid, Mother's Mercy, Phalanx, and Swords. Now, Phalanx, I should have saved an extra Night Mark for Chapter 4 so that he had Phalanx 3. As of right now, he only has Phalanx 2, which means he was taking more damage than he needed to. I did end up running so far down the wire financially in this playthrough that I actually ended up selling all the class marks, as well as all craftables and crafting books, in order to have enough money to be able to even make it through Hanging Gardens barely. So just know that, yeah, you should keep an extra Night Mark on hand, as well as you should pick up a Cleric Mark back in Chapter 1 and never use it until right before the final boss so that you have access to Mother's Mercy. I did make a mistake this time around and actually used the Cleric's Mark earlier than I should have, and ended up not actually getting Mother's Mercy the first time around, but anyways. So, you want First Aid, Mother's Mercy, and Phalanx. First Aid is just naturally on the class. If you pick up 3 auto cards and a crit card, that's going to be, in general, your best value for getting past that fight. Usually, what'll end up happening is he'll end up bombarding you with a bunch of debuffs. Mother's Mercy will clear those debuffs. Phalanx will make all the damage go away. First Aid will heal most of the damage. And realistically, you'll maybe need to use 1 Fruit of the Seraph. I had 4 on him. He only ever needed the 1, and even then, he probably could have survived without it. Simply, this setup more or less nullifies everything. The sword that you get right before that fight is an effective counter to him, and it also gives you a good bit of defensive bonuses. So either way, it tends to be a pretty massive benefit for you. You can technically run Lombardia for this as well, so that he just does counterattacks the whole time, though it's not nearly going to be as good as this thing. Like, stats-wise, it doesn't seem like too big of a difference, but it's pretty notable. So while you will be counterattacking, you will constantly be taking slightly more damage, and on top of that, those counterattacks will usually be relatively ineffective because you'll usually be hit with fear when you're doing those attacks, which means that they'll just basically plank off. So you wait for him to do multiple attacks back to back, you try to stand next to automatic cards, and then once he ends up jumping on those automatic cards, every time he grabs one of those, it weakens him a little bit more. So it gets rid of his buff cards, and then from there he'll just keep doing melee attacks until eventually you can just spam Rending Gale a few times, maybe Vile Wound, kind of depending on your MP situation. And yeah, eventually he'll die. It's very consistent. It's not the quickest thing in the world, but it typically will take like 10 minutes or so. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the team. So we've got our 3 aces that were there for most of it. So Canopus was there from the very start. Now, this is the Dirk that he upgraded back in Chapter 1. The same time that you're upgrading upgrading Denim to his rapier, you're upgrading your archers to their longbows, you give Canopus his Dirk, and you give him his shortbow. In Chapter 2, you'll be upgrading that Dirk and shortbow from the shop, and additionally, you can just go for the option to upgrade everyone's equipment across the board in order to give everyone sort of their upgraded gear, in order to give them their jump buffs and their movement buffs. This will waste a little bit of money at the time, but it will save you a ton of menuing for anything additional. You can also upgrade their armor if it's Balder or higher. Everything Balder or higher will give you Wade, but that will be some additional menuing to get done at that point. Now, Early on, he will be switching immediately to daggers, because not only will they be faster, they'll weigh less, but the finishers end up working well with his good starting element. Heart Crusher is one of the best scaling finishers in the game there. A lot of bosses end up running Earth Element, and primarily the strategy that you're going to be running for most of it is just finding whatever thing has to die, hitting it with Breach, and then bombarding it with various types of finishers. Eventually bringing in stuff like Lobber Bombs and whatnot. So in this case, Heart Crusher is just very, very good for this purpose. He's been hitting quadruple digits basically all game. Yes, even into Hanging Gardens, the guy was still one-shotting stuff with his Chapter 1 weapon. It's just that good. Okay. Another thing to note here, technically there's one thing that did not get used over the course of this playthrough that I tried to use, but unfortunately Aircell ended up intercepting, which is that you can get one fairy. Now that fairy can be gotten over here. So let's go ahead and go back to the Warren Report real quick. If you would like to work a fairy into your strategy here, right in Chapter 2, here, let's go ahead and go back to here and go to here. Right up here, there will be a fairy. If this fairy dies, they'll drop a major heal. Otherwise, they'll wind up around here on the map. And you can usually have a round or two in order to try to recruit them. The problem is, once you get them within range to be able to recruit them, usually Aircell will start trying to kill her, and unless she parries, you won't get another shot. So you usually only have one or two tries to actually get that fairy recruited. So if you do accomplish that, that allows you to have a healer capable of kind of area charming, as well as healing on the same round. They're a fantastic unit to have. There's only that one opportunity to get one. You won't run into a fairy for the whole rest of the playthrough. Now, that one is exceptionally good if you get it, but again, if you don't plan to use fairies, you can just kind of leave that slot empty until you get Alcolos Winds, and once you get either Shortbow or Balderbow upgrades, this can combine with both of them to be a very effective kind of squishy killer. Alright. Next, the units that carried Chapter 4, obviously, are going to be Gildas and Murden. In this case, Gildas ended up losing his pants because I needed some more Balder pants for Denim at the very last second there. I ended up going Spear and Two-Hander for the Breach and Poison, respectively. Build was effectively just Velocity Shift. I was running Paralysis Blade up until we got Steadfast. Once you get Steadfast, you live with Steadfast. Alright? Don't question me on that. Steadfast is more useful than Paralysis Blade. Just do it. Alright. Now, the reason that we went for these weapons in particular, Giga Tempest, as well as Lightning Strike and Cyclone Saber, are exceptionally good for clearing a lot of these kind of Lotus-centric maps. They tend to have a lot of water element units, and they also tend to have earth element units. Both of these are going to be weapon skills that they come trained up with. Both of them have debuff weapons available to them in the form of the Claymore, which you will get for free right before you get your White Knights, so you can just immediately go and upgrade this Claymore. Normally, for everybody else, I would recommend sticking with this Vihander because it's a little faster. Gildas and Murden have a pretty notable stat advantage over basically everybody, so it is worth kind of investing into some nicer weapons for them. And then I gave Murden the Scorpion for that counter poison. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on. So one of the other MVPs of this run, and don't get me wrong, the main MVPs, I will say, of this run are actually these two archers over here. We'll get to them. They're going to require their own discussion, but Ninja, right? This guy was picked up as a just random pick in Chapter 3. Wasn't expecting anything from this guy whatsoever. I honestly was about to go drop him before he even joined the team, but I was getting him for Envenom. Now, Poison is a very useful tool in a lot of situations. Now, before somebody starts making DPS arguments and that's a speedrun, yes, but you have to realize Poison acts very quick, and being able to act quickly go into locations that other people can't, because in his case he has one higher jump than everybody else, and has a weapon that fires faster than most other people are able to do anything. He's able to spread poison very, very quickly. Additionally, because of this, he's able to use this relatively quick weapon with this to spread more damage than most people are doing with their standard weapons. And during that time, he's building up MP from all of these plink shots in order to use Darkblade. Now, this is another one that I really was not expecting to perform as well as it did, because due to the 5 range on this thing, he was seemingly constantly on hand to provide assistance versus any bosses that had been breached. This one is not exactly the fanciest move in the world, but its wide range means that it's wide range and low cost means that it's usually in a pretty darn good position to abuse any breached boss. So normally he would just poison as much as he can in order to disrupt healing, in order to put some pressure on heavier units, just cause general purpose chaos, and then if he can poison the boss, he'll poison the boss and then go in for a Darkblade. If he, for example, needs to use a Flaming Blast or Thunder Wave to take advantage of an elemental weakness, yeah, sure, but most of the time he was just spamming Darkblade because that sucker is frickin' cheap. He hasn't even upgraded his sword since back in when we got him. I completely forgot to even go and look if this thing had an upgrade, but it was enough to be a constant threat as much as something like Murden or Gildas was. Not necessarily that this one is particularly deadly in its use, it's just that he was always in the right place at the right time to, for example, just abuse crits or whatever else. So either way, really solid performance from that guy. Now next, we're going to skip these two for just a second. Actually, no, we'll talk about the chicken next. No, we will talk about the archers next, because they really deserve a discussion here, because these guys are basically the MVPs of the run. I'm pretty sure their kill count was higher than anybody else. Now why? Archers weak, dude! You gotta DPS and get wizards! We have not used any wizards over the course of this playthrough. The whole idea behind archers is that they are there to abuse the squishies, they are there to shut down everybody else. So their game plan is as follows. They go forward, they find the casters, they find the clerics, they kind of rapid fire on them, and once they are all dead, they end up using their finishers, like for example slumber shots or whatever else, to shut down any slower units and prevent them from joining the fight. If they can charm something, great. If something is at a awkward elevation, like let's say they got ninjas or something that decided to go run up on top of a hill, if they're hit by a dark weight, they're suddenly out of the fight for 3 rounds, you know? So great stuff there. Basic armor kept them functioning throughout the entire thing. We just went for stuff with a general purpose dex bonus. Probably could have gotten a little bit more out of this one by switching her over to slops, but honestly it's fine. And yeah, basically that was their game plan the entire time. They did it well, they did it successfully, and it is what it is. So again, I'm pretty sure their kill count was higher than absolutely anybody else on the team. Now you'll notice the weird mismatch on their weapons. So in Chapter 2, we pick up longbows. Now normally I pick up 4 because I was used to running more longbows before and wanting to have a safety option in case someone got shot off a cliff. Seeing as we didn't take a single casualty this time, I would say it's pretty safe to just upgrade 2 longbows at the very start of the game. And then once you do that, you're basically set up until you get a siege bow for free in Chapter 4. Once you upgrade the siege bow, you give that to your best one. If you can afford a second siege bow, give that to your second best. Now, why are we looking for longbow and siege bow in particular? They're not necessarily the strongest. It's because they have extra range. Those are the 2 bows up until we get to the kind of better elemental bows that will have extra range on them, and that is very, very useful for going and firing beyond range at clerics, wizards, or whatever else. So please remember to abuse the extra firing beyond range capabilities of these bows. It's what makes them valuable. Alright, next, the Beast Tamers. So this team has 3 Beast Tamers once we get to the very end. And the way that I typically like to run this is I've got one that is going to be, let's say, the starting basic axe soldier, right? Now you might notice I did a bit of a whoopsie and I gave him the axe skill instead of while having a Caldia. I constantly gave this guy the wrong skill. Just don't worry about it. So I have the main kind of starting unit that you start off with. Again, left him with a Caldia because at that point I'd sold all of my axes already and I wasn't about to go buy another. And from there, I like to try to recruit a Hawkman at some point. You can get 2 of them potentially in Chapter 1. You can get multiple in Chapter 2. There's constantly going to be Hawkmen that show up in your path. Just spam recruit. If you don't get them within a couple attempts, just move on to the next one. There's always going to be another Hawkman. But as soon as you get one, switch them over to a Beast Tamer. In this case, this was Zapan's Hawkman, who already was a Beast Tamer, so that ended up working out pretty nicely. Now, I like to typically run ranged weapons on them. So like this guy ended up running blowguns. If they have a melee weapon, like use the melee weapon in their offhand and use the whatever their ranged weapon is in their main hand. There's nothing wrong with running multiple skills on them. But ideally you want to run something like Subdue, and actually this explains some things. I hit Empower Dragon instead of Empower Beast. No wonder it never triggered the whole time. Anyway, so yeah, make sure to hit the right buttons for one thing. But the benefit that this gives you is that if you have any low health beast units, they have an incredible amount of bulk. Now, you're going to want at least one primary beast unit. I ended up recruiting 2 over the course of this playthrough. One is a backup, one is a primary. If you lose more than 2 beast units, honestly, that run is probably already scuffed, and you're probably going to figure out something else. But there's a lot of convenient beast units that you can recruit that will all essentially be able to serve the same purpose. And that's because you want to have a dash unit. We'll get to that next, but as far as the beast units, or the beast tamers go, their primary purpose was to spread debuffs. So for example, we already had archers with Eagle Eye available. This means we had guaranteed charm available from a Wart Dart blowgun. Additionally, we had guaranteed silence available from the short bow. So he goes in, let's say silence is a cleric, this guy goes in, and he turns around the front line. That front line now has a gap that everyone else can run through, and also they don't have enough healing, okay? They didn't need to do damage, they're essentially winning the fight without fighting. From there, we also have one dedicated lobber bomber, which I always end up using Olivia for. And the reason for this is because the Beast Tamer is able to use cudgels, and the mace that she always comes with is already going to transfer into this class. So she can just immediately switch and be effective as a lobber bomber. And essentially, I just give her 4 conflagration shots in most cases, and effectively she's just used as a mortar. Now, these conflagration shots, you can use whatever element you'd like. I just kind of use these because they're red and they stick out in the menu. There is a slight difference as far as elements are concerned, as far as whether they'll do a little bit more or less. But for the most part, they're a fairly flat amount of damage. They get around most defenses, and additionally, they have exceptionally long range. By the time you get to the final rank of the lobber, you basically have the same range as a longbow. And the benefit of this is that you can kind of area snipe almost anything. It's very expensive to do so because it costs 750 per each shot, but it does allow for essentially cracking a lot of that big difficulty spike towards the end of the game. Because once you're in Chapter 4, you're not only climbing up over the course of more than 10 levels very, very quickly, which immediately starts to feel noticeable if you're not taking your elemental advantages, breaches, things like that, but additionally, there's going to be a lot of moments where it feels like your weapon skills are falling behind, which is another benefit of running maces on her. With all other weapon types, you have to actively attack an enemy. In her case, while she's waiting for opportunities to use her conflagration shots, she can simply bonk her allies upside the head for 1 damage and train up her weapon skill very quickly. Once she trains it up to 30, she gets access to pressure whirl, which means that in between using her lobber bombs, she's able to kind of area bomb some things, pick up an MP card on her, pick up a crit card on her, and she's effectively running 2 different types of AoE damage. She's just, again, basically a mortar at that point, and she more or less comes purpose-built for this whole thing. So, either way, great stuff there. And then that gets us into a couple of more notable mentions. Saria was just thrown in as a sort of slot filler here. Hobrim served no purpose whatsoever over the course of this run. And then Voltaire and Roija here were effectively our frontliners before we got Murden and Gildas. So Voltaire's purpose was basically just run up, hit something with a hammer, and attempt to recruit. If they get recruited, great, they're on your side, and you no longer have to wait for them to take their turn. It saves you a ton of time. Terror Knight, we went for a passive approach with a sleep and concentration combination. Purpose of this was to run forward into a crowd, use Lament to get rid of their offense, just kind of neutering them in general. Yes, these two kind of contradict each other. And also she's going for sleep to try to put stuff to sleep. If there's anything that you can put completely out of commission, it's worth a lot more than trying to just go and out DPS stuff all the time, because they will eventually just heal it off. But if you can spread a bunch of debuffs, you're going to be far better off. Now we get to the beast unit, which is kind of the core of the strategy to an extent. We'll talk about the backup beast unit first. So there's a lot of beast units that you can get that will all serve the same kind of purpose here. The first one that you can get, the first two rather, that you can get are going to be in the Zapan fight, and we attempted to get those, but they kept running away. And those are the octopi. You're able to potentially get two of them there. Again, if you just get one, take your one and move on. They're able to use dash, they're able to use a poison rain, which is very good at spreading a lot of poison, obviously, and they have a long-range breach, which might potentially save you some money over time through their aqua bubble. That aqua bubble, if it lands its breach, if you give them all of your mind charms, they will be a very, very big money saver for you. I've used them before for that purpose, and they will, they completely change the financial situation. They can't fly, they don't necessarily have some of the cooler stuff that some of the other classes do, but free long-range breach and poison, even though they're kind of subject to either water tiles or their aqua veil triggering, immense value. So great units to have. But the Cyclops is the second one that you get, which is going to come from the Vice fight, and that's where this guy's from. You can also get two more later from Zybos, but their primary thing is that they're able to essentially use Dash and Howl, which allows them to run in and cause mass stun, and that's a huge value. If they can run in, block an area, and stun a bunch of units, that's also potentially going to save you a bunch of time. Spell-wise, from the Hector fight, if you're doing Chaos route, you can get Spell Charge. So if you do that fight normally, you'll usually get Spell Charge, which allows him to send his MP to somebody else. And so, for example, you keep him within range of somebody like Canopus, that is a free Heart Crusher whenever you'd like it. So either way, he doesn't, his offense is nothing to really write home about. His ranged attack is somewhat okay for bullying, clerics or whatever else, but usually he's a stun spammer, he's an area holder, and he's a spell charger, which is, again, a very interesting little niche to have. After that, you have two cockatrices that are available from the Pirate Darza fight. These are probably going to be the easiest to get, but the fight potentially might go somewhat quickly. Now, regardless of the beast unit that you use, I like to run a setup kind of like this. So you got one percentage-based heal. So this is the Mending Salve. Right as you get to your first castle fight, as you complete your first castle fight, you get Medicine 2. Don't even bother buying a healing item until you get those salves, because 75% is really the best healing item in the game. As far as time, as far as cost, everything else, you just get the most out of these healing salves. So use the salve +1 exclusively. Up until that point, just use whatever Mend Leaves you've got on hand. Magic Leaves, just sell them. There was only one Magic Leaf we used over the course of this entire playthrough, and it's just because I didn't have anything else to put in Canopus's pockets at the time, and it was just a kind of basic one there. Figured I would just use it for the last fight. Now, anyways, so one healing item, because they have a ridiculous amount of health, one Breach, one Grog, and then one Blessing Stone. So reason for these, you're primarily using the bird for area denial and bulk. So once they have dash, they're able to get into position to block off staircases, block off units from moving, and they're able to circle around boss units. In this case, the Petro Breath is exceptionally good, because if they get it on a cleric, good, that cleric's out of business for a while. But Constitution is non-negotiable. Any boss in the game, even with an elemental advantage versus them, cannot one-shot a cockatrice. Even in the best case scenario that they're buffed and whatever else, they cannot get past the bulk of a cockatrice, or a griffin for that matter, or any of these beast units running Constitution. They simply don't have the punch. They'll do a very impressive looking number versus a human unit, but versus a beast unit, they've got double the health. They don't care. So they'll be able to survive that. One Mending Salve will be enough to completely undo that. There's going to be a lot of cases, especially on Chaos, where you're running into a lot of Terenites. That's what the Grog is for, since they're there primarily as a way to kind of facilitate your attack, as it were. So if, for example, you have a squishier boss, they land behind said boss, they drop a Dynast King's Meat on it, you send in the longbows, and you're done. If, for example, it's something a bit tougher, like a knight, you got your Zabos, you got your Felnatores, you've got your Latimers, that's when they'll go drop a Dynast King's Mead, and then they'll go ahead and bring in somebody like Canopus or the White Knights. And in those situations, there's going to be cases where if they get hit by let's say, a Terenite along the way, their attacks are going to be completely impotent. So given that the cockatrice is going to be faster than everything else on the team, they're usually going to be the quickest one to be able to go remove fear. You'll usually get enough grogs over the course of the playthrough that you never have to buy any, so you can just kind of have that there, and then you have a blessing stone in case somebody goes down. Same old, you give them an kind of instant turn kind of action, right? So that's what the beast units are for. Now the Griffin can do the same thing, except with stun breath. Obviously, these guys can run stun breath also. Just remember to stick to the basic version because it is very cheap. You do not have time to build up the 50 MP for everything else. Numbing Hook works. Stun breath works. Both of them are going to be just fine. Numbing Hook is arguably going to be a little better in some cases because it's able to attack diagonally. But again, this is primarily used as a shutdown move. But due to enemy units typically not having or not really paying attention to these guys for the purpose of leaden, you're usually fine running something like dash and basically just kind of dash, constitution, all that kind of thing. You can run feather step instead of pincer, but there are cases that it seemed kind of worthwhile to have pincer. For all of your frontliners, you pretty much always want to have pincer on them because, you know, obvious reasons of you typically want pincer. As time goes on, you have other skills that are potentially able to do a bit more. You can kind of phase out that pincer over time. But for example, pretty much all the frontliners were running pincer for a very long time over the course of this whole thing. And especially if you happen to hire enemy units, they will almost always have pincer on them. So they're usually really good at setting those up as well. Okay, so I think that more or less covers what we ran into. As far as items are concerned, let's go ahead and talk item economy real quick, because we were basically out of everything by the end of it. So let's talk priority on items. So Arion plumes are fairly cheap. I typically kept an overstock of about 5 on these, and usually ran them on about half of my heavy hitters. So I ran them on my longbows, I ran them on Canopus, and would run them on the White Knights. When it came to Jules the Avatar, I left it in any situation that they might need a bit more bulk. So for example, on the Knight, on Denim, or on the Cyclops, it was pretty handy there. These were just 2 that dropped right here. Healing items, we exclusively use Mending Salves, rarely ever more than 1. The only times that we ever used more than 1 healing item were for specific one-on-one boss fights, like for example the Leonor duel, as well as the final boss, in which case he still only needed 1 Fruit of the Seraph. As far as the Leonor duel goes, honestly, I had a bit of a brain fart over the course of the playthrough there, because what I should have done is just run back and forth and use the Rune Fencer's constant magic missile spam to just never fight the guy to begin with. And for some reason, my brain just completely fizzled out, and I tried to go 1v1 the guy. Yeah, that whole experience was pretty dumb. Eventually, I just killed him off with a short bow. Just used the ninja strategy, and then felt really dumb afterwards. But yeah, that was an easy 20 minutes plus that could have been saved on that particular fight. Because, yeah, he ended up getting his bow skill, where the hell did it go? All the way up to 17 over the course of that one fight. Definitely not the way to be handling that one. As far as other items are concerned, typically kept a roughly like 12 overstock on Dynast King's Meads. These were easily the biggest expenditure. These are easily why somebody like the Octopus is easy to work into a team here. But these will run on anybody that had any opportunity to breach a boss whatsoever. Your first plan will almost always fail, so just kind of use these on whoever. Like I had a pretty bulky Denim, so I kept one on him, I kept one on Canopus, as well as keeping one on the Chicken and the Beast Tamers. So I kept 2 Beast Tamers that were able to throw one of these, and one that was just exclusively running Lobber Bombs. For Lobber Bombs, I ran 1 Lobber Bomb on one Beast Tamer, 2 on another, as well as 4 on another, just so we had enough to take out basically any boss if we needed to scale it up at any point, because it's better to have too much than too little there. As far as Blessing Stones, typically these were going to be the last expense, but one that you never wanted to run out of. Usually I tried to run an economy of about an overstock of about 3 per each time that we went to the shop. And due to the fact that these item kind of usages can vary, typically I sold all equipment that wasn't strictly necessary for the playthrough. And so, for example, we ended up selling almost everything except for our primary debuff weapons, sold almost all armor along the way, and even still it was extremely tight, to the point that we even ended up selling a good bit of the crafting books to actually make it by, including a lot of the class marks and things like that. So Just know that it is very, very tight, so you want to try to be careful with your expenditures, but pretty much every time you drop into a town, there's nothing wrong with popping into the store and just restocking real quick, just to make sure that you have enough items, because you will lose a lot more time if you don't have those items. Alright, is there anything else to really cover here? Let's see. So as far as restocking, again, just don't feel bad about doing that every few fights or so. The main thing as far as saving time in kind of Chapter 1, saving menuing and whatnot, when you're upgrading everybody's equipment, just do the upgrade all option. Your default kind of leather and chain gear is fairly cheap to upgrade. Upgrade leggings first, hands second. Just sell some random garbage if you can't upgrade all of them. Then from there, just kind of keep moving that equipment to whatever units are showing up next. At one point, we did have Aerocel's stuff get stolen by Vice, which was kind of hilarious. Technically, we didn't have any official deaths from the party, but Aerocel didn't make it because for some reason she decided to go bum rush straight into the enemy team. Yeah, that's kind of about that. Oh yeah, there was actually one more thing that I ended up taking away from him. But if you are still running your knights and stuff, remember that Phalanx with Lobber Bombs does actually work great. They can just sort of AoE off of themselves. So sometimes that is a useful way to attack with them, but just kind of something to consider. Usually I'll keep at least one Lobber Bomb on any knight as a sort of way to just kind of give them a little bit of a buffer move, as it were. But yeah, that was about that. So if there's any questions over whether or not archers, shortbows, and things like that are unable to keep up with a speedrun, that is technically 2 hours off of the official speedrun using this particular method. It worked particularly well. Just remember, breach targets. You don't necessarily even need fear in a lot of cases. It does benefit a ton, but just swapping elements primarily for your 2 archers, and then just kind of having beast tamers to cover everything else works absolute wonders. Having a poisonous shortbow is a very, very valuable asset. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's... oh yeah, last little thing, charms. So, experience charms. We had a good bit of those left over at the end of things here, but there were a few moments where I needed to go throw charms at units to go and speed stuff up. Usually, I tended to prioritize units like Canopus, Denim, as well as the archers. Once we got to Hanging Gardens, I tended to strictly prioritize White Knights and Denim, because they were usually the ones that were doing the most stuff at that point. You know, Vartan was already maxed out by that point. Now, these will give you slight stat upgrades, obviously, but it's just kind of a useful thing to do every now and then. Don't necessarily worry too much about hitting specific level thresholds, just kind of throw them on there in general to boost somebody in particular. Actually, I forgot I threw a bunch at this Cockatrice as well, because they're also pretty well subject to stuff, and also because every time that they gain a new level, it tends to give them a good bit of bulk. And this also tends to be a lot faster when you're going and doing it with buttons, because you can just sort of do this the whole time. Other than that, charm-wise, pretty much threw every charm onto Denim because I was expecting to use the summoning method once we got to the end. I ended up doing the Brynhilder method instead. As far as the chicken goes, a far better approach would actually just be to give every mind charm to your beast unit, whatever they happen to be, because it'll make them a lot more effective at hitting their secondary effects. Okay, so that's about it. That's about everything. That is the full report on the stuff that was useful and whatever else for this this particular speedrun, as far as the stuff that worked, the stuff that didn't. I hope that maybe there's a way to get that last hour or so back, you know, from the speedrun there. If it counts, it counts. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, honestly, I'm never going to have the time to do another one anyway, so if it happens, it happens. Again, there's not really anything to be gained for it. I know why I did it. I've got a video of it, so it is what it is. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to post them, and yeah, I will see you in the next one. So y'all take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.